A year of pretending. Marcus Rivera had become accustomed to life's constant struggles, raising his 7-year-old son alone, buried under crushing debt, working at a job that barely kept them surviving. But when he received a summons to meet the company's most influential executive on the executive floor, his fears went far beyond losing his job. Sophia Chen didn't terminate him. She met his gaze directly and declared, "I need you to pose as my spouse for 12 months." Marcus was stunned. Then he posed the only question that truly mattered, half in jest, half seriously. "So we'll be sleeping in the same room." That's when everything became complicated. It was nearly 9 on a Monday evening when Marcus's phone lit up on his desk. He sat hunched over his computer in the office's dim lighting, crafting another forgettable slogan for a product destined to be ignored. The daycare center was calling. He answered to hear Miss Thompson's weary voice explaining his son had developed a fever and would need early pickup the following morning if it persisted. He promised to be there. He always kept that promise. Marcus ended the call and pressed his palms against his eyes, exhausted in that particular way that comes from managing too many responsibilities and failing at most. This had been his reality for 3 years, since losing his wife and inheriting a 7-year-old, overwhelming medical expenses, and an existence barely held together by determination and desperation. He closed his files, powered down his laptop, and retrieved his coat. The office stood nearly vacant. Most colleagues had departed hours earlier. Marcus was approaching the elevator when he turned a corner too quickly and collided with someone. A designer folder tumbled from her grasp, scattering documents across the glossy floor. Marcus immediately dropped down, apologizing while gathering the papers. The woman knelt across from him, her movements deliberate and measured. Looking up, he recognized her instantly. Sophia Chen, Senior Vice President, the type of person who didn't engage in casual conversation and didn't require validation. She was 29, possessed the coldness often associated with powerful individuals, and rarely acknowledged anyone below the executive level. She reached for the folder simultaneously as Marcus. Their hands didn't make contact, but the space between them felt charged. Marcus handed her the folder and stood. Sophia straightened, her face revealing nothing. She thanked him without warmth and turned to depart. That should have concluded their interaction. But it didn't, because Marcus noticed something she'd overlooked: a sealed envelope, cream-colored with embossing, partially concealed beneath a nearby cabinet. He retrieved it and called out to her. Sophia stopped and returned. Marcus approached, extending the envelope as though it might detonate in his possession. Sophia accepted it and opened her bag, producing 5 crisp $100 bills and offering them forward. Marcus stared at the currency, then at her. He declined, explaining he was simply returning lost property and required no compensation. Sophia's eyes narrowed slightly, as if confronting an unexpected puzzle. She confirmed his refusal. Marcus affirmed it and walked away, leaving her standing in the corridor with the money still extended. What Marcus didn't realize was that Sophia Chen never forgot such interactions. She returned to her office and accessed the employee database. Marcus Rivera, copywriter, lower tier, single parent, financial situation compromised, no corporate connections, no alliances with her brother Victor. She leaned back and considered carefully. Victor had been undermining her position for years, quietly sabotaging her initiatives. Sophia needed someone unblemished, someone manageable. Marcus Rivera matched the criteria perfectly. 7 days later, Marcus received notification from Human Resources, a mandatory meeting on the executive floor at 9 the following morning. No explanation provided, only Sophia Chen's name attached. Marcus read it multiple times, attempting to determine his offense. He arrived at 8:55, wearing his only properly fitting suit. The executive floor was constructed of glass and steel, all precise angles and harsh illumination. A receptionist directed him to a conference room. He entered to find Sophia seated at the table's head. She gestured toward the opposite chair. Marcus sat. Sophia dispensed with preliminaries. She'd reviewed his employment history: competent, dependable, unremarkable. Then she stated something that made his stomach plummet. She required his assistance with something unrelated to his position. Sophia explained her father's estate documents. The company had been bequeathed to her, but with a stipulation: the controlling party must be married. Without marriage before her 30th birthday, control transferred to Victor. Marcus inquired about her birthday. 11 months away, she responded. She needed a spouse, not authentic, contractual. 12 months. No emotions, no complications, purely performance. Marcus asked why she'd selected him. Sophia replied that he had no viable reason to refuse. She'd researched thoroughly. He owed over $120,000 in medical debt from his wife's illness, was 2 months behind on rent, barely affording childcare. Sophia could resolve everything. Eliminate his debt, double his income, provide comprehensive insurance, establish an education fund for his son. He simply had to perform the role. Marcus asked what performing entailed. Sophia explained: relocating to her residence, attending family gatherings, posing for photographs, convincing her brother and the board of their authenticity. Marcus posed the question lodged in his throat since she began speaking. Would they be sharing sleeping quarters? Sophia's expression remained unchanged. Only when necessary, only when convincing someone important required it. Marcus requested 24 hours to consider. Sophia agreed, handed him documentation with terms in barely comprehensible legal terminology, and escorted him out. That evening, Marcus sat in his son's room watching him sleep, small for his age, breathing soft and steady. He contemplated the life he was providing: the cramped apartment, second-hand clothing, constant fear that one difficult month would result in homelessness. He considered Sophia's offer: stability, security, a future without lying awake at 3 in the morning calculating insufficient finances. He retrieved his phone and composed a message, agreeing but insisting his son remain uninvolved. No publicity, no participation. Sophia responded within 2 minutes, accepting his terms. Marcus set down the phone and closed his eyes. He just commodified himself. He wasn't certain whether that made him intelligent or desperate. Probably both. The contract was executed 3 days later in a downtown law office. Everything specified: the compensation, the timeline, the parameters. No emotional involvement, no physical relationship unless appearances demanded it. Termination clause after 12 months. He signed and watched Sophia do likewise. She shook his hand. It felt like finalizing a business transaction, which he supposed it was. He relocated on Friday. The residence was austere and pristine, resembling a magazine staging. Sophia showed him to a guest quarters at the corridor's far end. She reiterated the parameters: no boundary violations, no personal inquiries, no expectations beyond contractual obligations. Marcus set down his belongings and surveyed the room, larger than his entire apartment. He felt like an intruder. That Sunday, they attended their inaugural family dinner at the Chen estate. Victor was present, positioned at the bar with whiskey in hand. He smiled upon seeing Marcus, the type of smile that didn't reflect in his eyes. He approached and shook Marcus's hand, his grip excessively firm. Victor expressed surprise, unaware Sophia had been seeing anyone. Sophia explained they'd kept it private. Victor inquired how they'd met. Marcus mentioned the office. Victor raised an eyebrow, asking Marcus's position. Sophia intercepted before Marcus could respond, stating Marcus worked in marketing. Victor nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on Marcus as if searching for deception. Dinner was rigid and formal. Marcus sat beside Sophia, his hand resting on her chair back as a spouse would. Sophia placed her hand over his momentarily, a brief touch appearing natural but feeling rehearsed. Victor observed them from across the table. During the drive home, Sophia stated Victor didn't believe them. Marcus asked how she knew. She replied that Victor never believed anything she did was genuine. That night, Marcus lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, contemplating the 12 months ahead and whether he'd survive them. Then he closed his eyes, attempting sleep. He didn't succeed. The initial 2 weeks felt like inhabiting a museum where Marcus was simultaneously exhibit and guard. Sophia departed before he woke and returned after he'd eaten dinner alone. They exchanged perhaps 10 sentences daily, mostly logistical. That constituted their marriage. Marcus spent evenings on the couch, cycling through television channels without interest, waiting for an acceptable bedtime. Weekends, he returned to his old apartment to see his son. Those were the only hours that felt authentic. 3 weeks after relocating, Sophia informed him of another family dinner, different this time. Downtown restaurant, the type where servers wore white gloves and menus lacked prices. Victor would attend, along with 2 board members. Sophia emphasized they needed to be convincing. They arrived 15 minutes early. Sophia wore an expensive-looking black dress. Marcus wore the same suit from the contract signing. They sat across from each other, waiting. Sophia told him to relax. Marcus claimed he was relaxed. She said he looked prepared for interrogation. He responded that he was. Victor arrived precisely on time, flanked by 2 suited older men. He greeted Sophia with a cheek kiss that appeared affectionate but felt threatening. Then he turned to Marcus, extending his hand. They sat and the performance commenced. Victor inquired about married life. Sophia called it an adjustment. One board member, silver-haired with a gravelly voice, asked Marcus's company role. Marcus stated copywriter. The man asked if that's how they'd met. Marcus confirmed. Sophia reached across, placing her hand over Marcus's, explaining they'd avoided office gossip by keeping it private. Victor watched silently throughout. When appetizers arrived, he finally spoke again, mentioning he'd always expected Sophia would partner with someone from their circle, someone understanding the family business. Sophia countered that Marcus understood more than Victor credited. Victor expressed hope, adding that the company wasn't kind to those who didn't belong. By departure, Marcus's jaw ached from clenching. Sophia remained silent during the drive home. Upon returning, she poured wine and stood by the window overlooking the city below. Marcus asked if she thought they'd succeeded. Sophia said Victor didn't believe them. She turned toward him, and for the first time since they'd met, she appeared exhausted. Not merely physically, but worn in the way people become after fighting too long without understanding why they're still standing. She explained Victor had always been favored. Their father had groomed him for company leadership from age 16. Sophia had been an afterthought. Then their father died, leaving the company to Sophia with one impossible condition. Victor never forgave her. Marcus apologized. Sophia looked at him as though uncertain how to process the apology. She finished her wine and said goodnight. Marcus remained in the living room another hour, contemplating the woman who'd purchased his loyalty and wondering if she'd ever had anyone provide it freely. The following week, the power failed. A storm swept through, eliminating electricity across 3 neighborhoods. The residents went dark just after 10. Sophia entered the living room using her phone as illumination. Marcus located 2 wine glasses and poured drinks. Sophia sat at the couch's opposite end, legs tucked beneath her. They sat in darkness without speaking initially. Then Sophia asked why he'd truly agreed to this. Marcus said she already knew why. She said she knew the contractual reasons but wanted to know his thoughts when signing. Marcus took a long drink and explained he'd been thinking about his son, about what kind of father allows his child to grow up poor when he can prevent it. Sophia asked if he regretted it. Marcus said he didn't know yet. He asked if she regretted it. Sophia said no, she'd do whatever necessary to prevent Victor from winning. Marcus said he'd entered with full awareness. She didn't owe him apologies. Sophia looked at him, and in the faint phone glow, he could see something shifting in her expression. She noted most people would have accepted the money while resenting her. Marcus said perhaps he still would, but not tonight. They conversed until power returned 2 hours later. Sophia described growing up in the Chen household, being invisible until convenient otherwise. Marcus shared about his wife, about her final 6 months when the hospital became their second home. When lights flickered back, they both blinked against sudden brightness. Sophia stood, saying she should return to work. She paused at the doorway, looking back. She said thank you. Marcus didn't ask why. The following Saturday, Marcus mentioned over breakfast he was taking his son to the park. Sophia surprised him by asking to accompany them, wanting to see his life outside the residence. Marcus hesitated, then agreed. He was pushing his son on swings when Sophia arrived, wearing jeans and a sweater, no makeup, hair pulled back, appearing younger. His son noticed her first, asking who the lady was. Marcus said she was a friend. Sophia approached and greeted them. His son asked if Sophia was his girlfriend. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing emerged. Sophia crouched to his son's level and confirmed she was. His son asked if that meant Sophia was becoming his new mother. Sophia looked at Marcus, panic visible in her eyes. Marcus told his son that wasn't how it worked. The boy said okay and returned to the swings. They walked along the pond's edge while his son ran ahead. Sophia inquired about him. Marcus shared basics, 7 years old, intelligent, obsessed with dinosaurs. Sophia smiled, saying he sounded wonderful. Marcus agreed. Sophia asked what his son knew about the arrangement. Marcus said nothing, and it would remain that way. Sophia called that smart, adding his son was fortunate to have him. Marcus said he was the fortunate one. They stood momentarily, watching the boy run in circles, laughing at nothing particular. Then Sophia said she should leave. Marcus said okay. She departed without looking back. That night, Marcus lay in bed contemplating how Sophia had looked at his son, not with detached politeness, but with something quieter, resembling longing. He wondered what her life might have been if she'd been permitted to want things untied to power or legacy. 2 weeks later, they had wedding photographs taken, Sophia's idea. She said the family needed proof. The photographer met them downtown. He posed them against a white backdrop, instructing them to stand closer, look at each other, smile authentically. The photographer requested they hold hands. They complied. He asked Sophia to rest her head on Marcus's shoulder. She did. He asked Marcus to place his arm around her waist. Marcus hesitated. Sophia whispered it was fine. He positioned his arm and she leaned into him. Briefly, it didn't feel like acting. The photographer asked them to look at each other. They did. Marcus looked into Sophia's eyes and saw something unexpected: vulnerability, fear. The same things he felt contemplating the next 10 months. The photographer captured the photo and Sophia immediately stepped back, the moment shattering like glass. During the drive home, neither spoke. Upon returning, Sophia went directly to her office and closed the door. Marcus sat on the couch staring at the ceiling, beginning to realize the boundaries they'd drawn weren't as clear as either had thought. A month later, Victor sent an email addressed to the entire board but really meant for Sophia. He raised concerns about her leadership, questioned recent decisions, corporate language for a coup. Sophia read it 3 times, hands trembling with anger. She called Marcus to her office and explained Victor was making his move. Marcus asked what that meant. Sophia said it meant Victor would attempt proving their marriage was fraudulent, would investigate Marcus's past, locate the contract, expose everything. Sophia said they needed greater conviction, needed to act like an authentic couple consistently, not just at dinners and photo shoots, but always. The next day, Victor called Marcus requesting a meeting, just them. Marcus agreed, despite every instinct warning it was a trap. Before leaving, Sophia stopped him, predicting Victor would attempt bribery or threats. She instructed Marcus to record everything. They met at a coffee shop near the office. Victor was already present when Marcus arrived, occupying a corner booth. Victor smiled, appreciating Marcus's attendance. He said he wanted directness. He knew Sophia had hired Marcus, knew about the debt, knew about the contract. He didn't blame Marcus for accepting the arrangement. But Victor said he also knew this wouldn't end well. When Sophia fell, Marcus would fall with her. Victor leaned forward, offering Marcus an exit if Marcus departed now. Victor would ensure the contract remained buried. Nobody would know. Marcus could resume his life, retain money Sophia had already provided, and move forward. He simply had to disappear. Victor called it the intelligent play, the safe play. He requested Marcus consider it. Then he stood and departed. Marcus sat there extensively after Victor left, contemplating the offer, his son, the life he could have by accepting Victor's exit. Then he thought about Sophia in that office working until midnight, fighting a battle she didn't know how to win. He thought about how she'd looked at him in the darkness when power failed, how she'd smiled at his son in the park. Marcus retrieved his phone and called Sophia, describing the meeting, Victor's offer. Then he stated he wasn't going anywhere. Sophia remained silent momentarily. Then she asked why. Marcus said because Victor was wrong, this wasn't going to end with them falling. It was going to end with them still standing. Sophia thanked him, her voice quieter than he'd ever heard. Marcus said she didn't need to thank him. He'd made his choice. But that night, lying in the guest room, Marcus wondered if he'd just made his life's biggest mistake. Because Victor wasn't the type to accept refusal, and Marcus had just made himself a target. Victor moved faster than Marcus anticipated. Within a week of their conversation, Sophia received notification of an emergency board meeting. The subject line was vague, something about reviewing executive leadership and corporate governance, but Sophia knew exactly what it meant. Victor had found something, or thought he had. Either way, he was ready to make his play. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10. Sophia told Marcus he didn't need to attend. He said he was attending anyway. She asked why. He said if Victor was going to destroy them both, he wanted to be present when it happened. Sophia didn't argue. The night before the meeting, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, running through every possible scenario. Victor had the contract, the financial records, proof that Sophia had eliminated Marcus's debts. There was no favorable interpretation. Around 3 in the morning, Marcus rose and walked to the kitchen. He poured water and stood by the window, observing city lights. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Sophia in the doorway, wearing an oversized sweater and sweatpants, hair loose around her shoulders. She appeared more human than he'd ever seen her. She asked if he was okay. Marcus said he was fine. She said he was a terrible liar. Marcus asked if she was scared. Sophia said yes. She'd spent her entire life trying to prove she was sufficient, and tomorrow Victor would stand before the board declaring her a fraud. Marcus said she wasn't a fraud. She said it didn't matter what the truth was, only what they believed. Marcus asked what she would do. Sophia said she would tell the truth, admit the marriage was contractual, admit she'd paid him. Then remind the board that her father's will was outdated and controlling, and that she'd been running the company better than Victor ever could. Marcus asked if she thought it would work. Sophia said no, but it was her only remaining move. They stood in the kitchen, silence stretching between them. Then Marcus said he wasn't going to let her do this alone. Sophia looked at him, and for the first time since they'd met, her mask completely slipped. She asked why he was still there, why he hadn't accepted Victor's offer and walked away when he had the chance. Marcus said perhaps because he was tired of running. Perhaps because he'd spent 3 years watching his wife die feeling powerless, and this was the first time in a long time he felt like he could actually fight for something. Sophia said he was going to lose. Marcus said perhaps, but at least he'd lose standing up. Sophia smiled slightly and said he was either very courageous or very foolish. Marcus said probably both. The boardroom was on the 40th floor, all glass walls and leather chairs. Marcus sat beside Sophia at the table's far end, facing Victor and the remaining board. There were 7 people total, excluding Sophia and Marcus. Victor sat at the table's head, expression calm and confident. He resembled someone who'd already won. The meeting began with pleasantries. The board chair, a man in his 60s named Mr. Harrison, thanked everyone for coming on short notice. He said concerns needed addressing regarding leadership stability. Then he transferred the floor to Victor. Victor stood, straightened his tie, and smiled. He began by saying he had nothing but respect for his sister. She'd worked hard, brought good ideas. But recently, he'd become aware of troubling information suggesting Sophia hadn't been entirely forthcoming about her personal life. Victor opened a folder and produced a stack of documents, proof that Sophia's marriage to Marcus Rivera wasn't what it appeared. He laid out evidence piece by piece: the contract, the financial transfers, the timeline of when Marcus's debts had been eliminated. He called it fraud, manipulation, and said it questioned her integrity and fitness to lead the company. The room went silent. All eyes turned to Sophia. She sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table. Then she stood. She said Victor was correct. She'd entered into a contract with Marcus, paid his debts, asked him to pretend to be her spouse for 1 year. All true, and she wouldn't apologize. Sophia said the problem wasn't that she'd hired Marcus. The problem was their father had written a will treating marriage like a leadership qualification, archaic and insulting. She'd done what was necessary to work around it. She'd spent the last 3 years increasing revenue by 38%, expanding into 2 new markets, turning Chen Marketing Solutions into one of the industry's most respected firms. She asked if any of that would have been possible if Victor had been in charge. Victor said that wasn't the point. The point was that she'd lied. Sophia said she'd played the game she was forced to play. Victor said she'd broken the rules. Sophia said the rules were broken to begin with. They stared at each other across the table, and Marcus could feel years of resentment crackling in the air between them. Then Marcus stood. Every head turned toward him. He said he had something to say. Mr. Harrison asked if it was relevant. Marcus said it was. He explained Victor had approached him 2 weeks ago offering money to walk away, tried bribing him into abandoning Sophia so he could expose the contract without interference. He said Victor hadn't cared about integrity or honesty, only about winning. Victor said that was false. Marcus retrieved his phone, opened his recording application, and played audio from their coffee shop meeting. Victor's voice filled the room, offering Marcus an exit, promising to bury the contract if Marcus disappeared. Board members exchanged glances. Mr. Harrison asked Victor if the recording was accurate. Victor said it was taken out of context. Mr. Harrison said it sounded quite clear. Marcus continued, explaining Sophia had granted him access to her internal files to help prepare for this meeting. While reviewing them, he discovered something. Victor had been using his executive access to monitor Sophia's emails and calendar for months, tracking her meetings, communications with the board, even personal correspondence. It was a direct violation of company policy and a breach of fiduciary duty. Marcus handed Mr. Harrison a folder with printed evidence, email logs, access records, timestamps showing Victor had been systematically spying on his own sister. The room went quiet. Mr. Harrison flipped through documents, expression hardening. He looked at Victor and asked if this was true. Victor said he'd been conducting due diligence. Mr. Harrison said it looked like corporate espionage. Another board member said it was grounds for immediate removal. Marcus said he'd stayed because Sophia was the best person to run this company, contract or no contract. He'd seen her work harder than anyone he'd ever met. She hadn't manipulated anyone. She just refused to let an outdated rule destroy everything she'd built. If the board wanted to punish someone, they should punish the system that forced her into this position. The room went quiet again. Mr. Harrison looked at Victor, then at Sophia, then at Marcus. He said the board needed time to deliberate and asked everyone except board members to leave the room. Sophia, Marcus, and Victor filed into the hallway. Victor glared at Marcus and said he'd just made a very significant mistake. Marcus said he didn't think so. Victor walked away without another word. Sophia and Marcus stood in the hallway waiting. Neither spoke. After 30 minutes, the door opened and Mr. Harrison stepped out. He said the board had reached a decision. Victor was being removed from his board position for ethical violations and abuse of executive access. Sophia would retain her position as senior vice president, but the marriage contract had to be dissolved within 30 days. The board would also review the will's terms with legal counsel to determine if the marriage clause could be challenged or removed entirely. Mr. Harrison said it wasn't a perfect outcome, but the best they could do given circumstances. He told Sophia she was fortunate to have someone willing to stand up for her the way Marcus had. Then he returned to the boardroom and closed the door. Sophia turned to Marcus and for a long moment simply looked at him. Then she said thank you. Marcus said she didn't need to thank him. She said she did. They left the building together and walked to the parking garage in silence. When they reached Sophia's car, she stopped and turned to face him. She said the contract was over. He didn't have to stay. Marcus said he knew. Sophia asked if he was going to leave. Marcus said he didn't know yet. He needed to figure out what his life looked like now that it wasn't being dictated by documentation. Sophia nodded, saying she understood. Then she got in her car and drove away. Marcus stood there in the parking garage watching her tail lights disappear, feeling something heavy settle in his chest. They'd won. They'd both won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of something he hadn't realized he wanted to keep. 2 weeks later, Marcus moved his belongings out of the residence. Sophia wasn't there when he left. She'd said goodbye the previous night, standing in his room's doorway, telling him she hoped he found whatever he was searching for. Marcus had said the same to her. He returned to his old apartment, back to his old life, back to the rhythm he'd known before Sophia Chen had walked into it. He picked up his son from daycare, made him dinner, read him a bedtime story. Everything was the same, except it wasn't, because he kept thinking about the woman in the residence, the one who'd purchased his time but had somehow ended up with more than that. 3 days after moving out, his phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. It said she wanted to meet, not as his boss, not as his ex-spouse, just as herself. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back and said yes. They met at a coffee shop on the east side, the type of place with mismatched chairs and indie music playing too loud. Sophia was already there when Marcus arrived, sitting by the window with tea in front of her, wearing jeans and a plain white shirt, no makeup, hair pulled back. She looked nervous. Marcus had never seen her look nervous before. He sat down across from her and said hello. Sophia said hello back. Then she said she'd been thinking about the last few months, about everything that had happened, about how it had ended. She said she'd spent so long pretending to be someone she wasn't that she'd forgotten what it felt like to just be honest. She wanted to try that now with him if he was willing. Marcus asked what that meant. Sophia said it meant no contract, no performance, no conditions. Just two people who'd been through something strange and difficult together, trying to figure out if there was something real underneath all of it. She said she didn't know if it would work, but she wanted to try. She asked if he did, too. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman who'd stood in front of a boardroom and refused to apologize. The woman who'd sat with him in the dark and told him the truth. The woman who'd smiled at his son in the park like she was trying to remember what it felt like to want something simple. He said yes, he wanted to try. Sophia smiled, and it wasn't the cold, controlled smile she wore in meetings. It was real. She said good. Then she asked him the question that had started all of this, the one that had been hanging between them since the first day. She said, "So, are we sharing a bed?" Marcus laughed. He said, "Maybe, but not tonight." Sophia said that was fair. They sat there for a while drinking coffee and talking about nothing in particular. And for the first time since they'd met, neither of them was pretending. They were just two people trying to figure out what came next. And that, Marcus thought, was a pretty good place to start.